The heat of the Louisiana afternoon pressed through the open garage doors of Jackson Hayes's workshop, settling heavy on oil-stained concrete and sun-warped tools. He wiped his calloused hands on a rag more from habit than need and stared into the horizon where the cypress trees swayed like ghosts, whispering to no one. The flyer still sat on the dash of his truck, a bright yellow thing he'd meant to crumple. Last chance military K-9 adoption. He had no intention of adopting a dog. His life had no room for another heartbeat, but something in the word disqualified tugged at him. At the shelter, the noise was overwhelming. Barking reverberated off concrete walls. Hopeful tails wagged behind cold bars, and families wandered cage to cage, considering rescue like shopping. Jackson kept to the edges, nodding politely at a few familiar faces, but offering no conversation. He wasn't there for connection. At least that's what he told himself. Then he saw it. A kennel at the far end of the row, quiet and slightly apart. Inside sat a German shepherd, not pacing or whining like the others, but still, completely still. Facing the back wall, unmoving, unseeing. The tag read, Nash K9435 not available for adoption. He's scheduled for disposal at 3A. Quiet voice said behind him. Ray Washington, a shelter worker with the kind of gentle presence people overlooked. Failed his reintegration. Won't eat. Won't respond. Shut down. Jackson's eyes locked on the dog's frame, powerful but gaunt coat, dulled from neglect. There was no peace in its stillness, only resignation. He dropped to one knee, ignoring the stab of pain that flared from his old firefighter injury. "What happened to you?" he whispered. No twitch, no breath. The dog could have been stone. Then, from somewhere deeper than memory, Jackson said softly, "Shadow." The reaction was immediate. The dog turned like a wire had snapped. Eyes wide, ears forward, muscles trembling with sudden life. For the first time in who knew how long, the dog was looking not at someone, but into someone. At him. Jesus, Ray breathed. That's the first time he's moved for anyone. Shadow stood stiff-legged and walked to the gate, eyes locked on Jackson, with the intensity of something remembered or recognized. He has a name, Jackson said quietly, never breaking eye contact with the dog. Michael Reynolds, the shelter director, appeared like a storm in a suit, clipboard in hand, and a face made for denial. That dog is K9435. Failed every behavioral assessment. He's not part of the adoption program. He just responded to me. Doesn't matter, Reynolds snapped. Too damaged, dangerous, unstable. The procedure is scheduled. He's government property marked for destruction. Jackson stood slowly. His knee ached, but his voice held. He responded to a name nobody knew he had. That means something. Unless you're a certified K-9 handler. I'll vouch for him. Ray interrupted. His voice wasn't loud, but it was steel. I've been watching him for 3 weeks. That was the first sign of life. If Mr. Hayes is willing to take responsibility, Reynolds hesitated, eyes darting between them. The liability will be yours. You'll sign waivers, all of them. I'll sign whatever you want, Jackson said. Where do I sign? The paperwork took nearly an hour. Form after form painted the German shepherd in cold legal terms. Unstable, aggressive, unsuitable. Jackson signed them all. Reynolds' gaze remained disapproving. Ray, in contrast, slipped him a bag of dog food and a worn leash, with quiet encouragement. Sometimes they just need the right person, he said. The drive home was silent. Shadow sat in the passenger seat, like stone, not panting, not moving, staring at the road like he was waiting for it to end. Jackson didn't speak either. He couldn't. The gravity of what he'd done, what he felt, wasn't logical. At the house, Jackson opened the truck door. Shadow didn't budge. Shadow, he said softly. Come. The dog moved. Not like a pet, but like a soldier, obeying command, deliberate, precise. He followed Jackson up the gravel path to the Barnhome hybrid, staying exactly 3 steps behind. Inside, Jackson watched as Shadow surveyed the space without expression. Kitchen couch, wood stove. Nothing drew his attention. Nothing softened his posture. Still rigid, still watching. "Make yourself at home," Jackson said, then added with a dry laugh, "Whatever that means to you." The German Shepherd didn't move. He stood like a sentinel, waiting for orders that would never come. Jackson filled a bowl with water and set it gently on the floor. The German Shepherd didn't react, not even a glance. It was as if his instincts had been muted, turned inward, as though basic needs like thirst or rest had been overwritten by something colder. "You drink when you're ready," Jackson muttered, rummaging in the kitchen for a can of soup. He stirred it on the stove, stealing glances at the dog. Still standing, still vigilant. "You're not in the field anymore, you know. There are no tests here, no commands. You eat when you're hungry, sleep when you're tired." Shadow's ears twitched just barely, the first involuntary motion Jackson had seen. As the day faded into dusk, Jackson settled on the worn sofa with a book he hadn't managed to finish in years. The pages blurred with fatigue and thought. When he glanced up, Shadow hadn't moved an inch. "For God's sake," Jackson said softly, "at least lie down." The command wasn't sharp, wasn't forceful. Still, the German Shepherd obeyed, instantly, legs folding beneath him with mechanical precision. Jackson sighed. "Not because I told you to," he said. "Because you want to." But Shadow's eyes gave no answer, only the hollow alertness of something trained to survive, not live. Later upstairs in the loft, Jackson couldn't sleep. The silence in the house wasn't empty. It pulsed with tension. Downstairs he heard nothing. No movement. Not even the sound of the dog's breathing. Around 2 a.m., thunder cracked over the trees, a sharp white flash slicing through the loft window. Jackson jolted upright, half from the storm, half from habit. Old nightmares lived just beneath his skin. Then he heard it, a keening whine from downstairs, a desperate circle of claws on tile. He rushed down and found Shadow pacing in tight, frenzied loops in the kitchen muscles, shaking eyes wild and unfocused. When the lightning flared again, the dog flinched as if struck. Jackson dropped to his knees despite the pain. Hey, it's just a storm." But it wasn't a storm, not to Shadow. Jackson had seen it before in other men. Panic that came from somewhere the mind couldn't reach, a memory stamped into the body like a brand. "Shadow," he said, voice low and steady. "You're here. You're safe." The dog froze, eyes locking on him through the haze. "That's it," Jackson whispered. "Focus on me." Shadow's breaths came fast and shallow, each one sharp enough to rattle in his throat. His legs trembled under the weight of remembered terror. Jackson didn't move. He simply stayed kneeling on the cold floor, present, unflinching. He knew this look, had worn it himself. After the warehouse blaze that took his team, the kind of fear that wasn't fear at all, but grief that couldn't speak. Eventually, the German Shepherd crept closer, inch by inch, until he lowered himself beside Jackson. Not touching, but close enough that the heat of his body radiated between them, like a lifeline. They stayed like that until morning, 2 broken souls anchoring one another through a night neither could outrun. As dawn broke, Jackson picked up the phone and called Dr. Amelia Wilson. "She can see him this afternoon," the receptionist said, voice tight with sympathy. "Just come by. We'll make room." The veterinary clinic looked like a leftover from a better time, a converted Victorian house with chipped blue paint and a porch bench that sagged in the middle. Dr. Wilson met them at the door, her auburn hair in a ponytail smile, calm but curious. "So this is the shelter ghost," she said, gently crouching near Shadow, but making no move to touch him. "He carries himself like a soldier." "He was scheduled for euthanasia," Jackson replied. 3 days ago. Her smile faltered. "Reynolds and his numbers," she muttered. "Come inside." Shadow followed them into the exam room with the grace of obedience, but none of the curiosity a dog might show. His compliance was the kind of surrender that worried her. "He's underweight," she said, running her hands along his spine. "But look here." She pointed to a faint surgical scar almost hidden beneath the fur. "Clean work. Not a battlefield patch-up. Planned. Precise. That tells me he was special." She unclipped the tag from Shadow's collar and frowned. "This isn't military standard." "Any idea what it means?" Jackson asked. "No," she said, "but I know someone who might." She picked up her phone. Marcus Thompson, retired K-9 handler, worked with units in the Middle East. "If this dog's been somewhere he shouldn't have, Marcus will know." As she dialed, Jackson noticed Shadow had fixed his eyes on something across the street, a black pickup idling at the curb engine running, and Shadow, still and electric, was trying to tell him something without a single sound. The black pickup was gone by the time Jackson circled around to his truck. But Shadow's shift in energy hadn't faded. It clung to him like static, a presence, now alert, coiled, and unmistakably aware. "You saw something," Jackson said as they drove. The dog didn't look at him, but his body remained tense, every muscle ready. Dr. Wilson had promised to reach out to Marcus Thompson. "Come by his place tomorrow afternoon," she'd said. "He won't answer his phone, but he'll talk to me." That night, Shadow chose to sleep beside Jackson's bed, not by command, but choice. Around midnight, Jackson woke to find the dog upright, staring at the window, ears forward. The storm outside had passed, but the dog's vigilance hadn't. The next day, Jackson found Marcus Thompson waiting on a porch flanked by decommissioned military gear and a flagpole flying both the American and Marine Corps flags. Marcus was all straight lines and sharp eyes, his posture unyielding even in age. "Amelia said you found yourself a military ghost," he said, nodding toward Shadow. Jackson introduced them. Marcus didn't offer a hand or a treat. He simply watched the way Shadow stood slightly in front of Jackson, not aggressive, but alert, protective. "That ain't no ordinary washout," Marcus said finally. "Come inside." The trailer was neat to a fault, every book, medal, and relic in its place. Marcus sat at a small table and examined Shadow's strange tag under a magnifying lamp. "This ain't standard issue," he said after a long silence. "It's from a program called Sentinel." "What kind of program?" "The kind that doesn't officially exist." Marcus leaned back, his voice quieter. "After 9/11, some outfits pushed beyond regulation. Not just training dogs, rewriting them, conditioning methods out of Russia. Some of those dogs, they didn't come back right." Jackson looked at Shadow, who had positioned himself silently by the door. "Your boy here." Marcus studied him. Stillness, shutdown reflex, hypervigilance. "I've seen that before. He wasn't just trained, he was shaped." "What happened to those programs?" "Shut down after congressional hearings in 2005, or so they said. But the contractors went private. No oversight. Big money." Marcus tapped the metal tag. "This dog's not a discard. He's the kind you don't throw away, which means someone didn't want him found." "Call him over," Marcus said. Jackson hesitated. "Shadow, come." The German shepherd moved like a tide returning to shore, controlled fluid, precise. He stopped exactly at Jackson's side, posture perfect. "Now give him a basic command." "Sit," Jackson said. Shadow obeyed instantly. Marcus narrowed his eyes. "Try something in another language." "I don't know any." Marcus tried German, then French, then a complex hand signal. Shadow didn't budge. "That's not normal," Marcus murmured. "Dogs trained at this level respond to multiple handlers, multiple cues. But he only reacts to you." "Because I used his name," Jackson said. "What name?" "Shadow." Marcus went still. Dogs like this don't have names, just designations. Names are liabilities. Emotional attachment interferes with performance. Jackson said nothing. Unless someone broke protocol and gave him one anyway. Marcus added, his tone dark. Which means someone cared enough to treat him like more than a weapon. They sat in silence until Marcus asked, "Has he reacted to anything specific?" Jackson told him about the thunderstorm, about the black pickup outside the clinic. Marcus nodded grimly. PTSD, target recognition. But it could be more. Sentinel wasn't just about obedience. Some of those dogs developed capabilities. Enhanced scent, advanced threat detection. I've heard of one that could identify IEDs before humans even noticed the signs. Jackson looked at Shadow, who stood like a statue at the door. "You said he reacted to a name you didn't know you knew," Marcus continued. "That he watches places before danger appears. Could be coincidence." He let the words hang. A knock cut through the room, 3 sharp raps. Shadow growled low, a sound Jackson hadn't heard until now. Not fear. Warning. Marcus reached for his disassembled revolver, snapping it together with practiced speed. Wasn't expecting company. The door opened before either of them could move. Dr. Wilson stepped inside, breathless. "They broke into my office," she said, eyes darting. "They took copies of Shadow's intake records." Jackson's blood ran cold. "And Reynolds," she added. "He's calling a special town council meeting. He's pushing for a dangerous animal ordinance, specifically targeting former military dogs." Marcus's expression hardened. "Someone's coming for your dog, Jackson." The town council meeting was set for the following night, but the war started sooner. That evening, Jackson returned home to find his workshop door ajar. He was sure he'd locked it. Inside, chaos reigned. Drawers pulled open, papers scattered. Nothing stolen, just searched. Systematically, thoroughly. The house was worse. Cabinets emptied, couch cushions slashed. Even the blanket Shadow had first slept on was tossed aside. Jackson's hands trembled as he picked up the shredded edges of his life. "They're not just watching us anymore," he muttered. Shadow didn't growl, didn't pace. He stood silently beside Jackson, but his eyes were hard guarded. That night, Jackson sat at the kitchen table by lantern light, cleaning his old service revolver. The storm outside knocked branches against the windows. Shadow lay nearby, but sleep never reached him. "What did you do, boy?" Jackson whispered. "What did you see?" The next day, the community center was packed. Sweat clung to the walls as locals fanned themselves with folded programs. Divided opinions filled the air. Some feared military dogs. Others defended them as heroes. Jackson sat at the back Shadow, lying motionless at his feet. Dr. Wilson joined him, her presence a shield against glares and whispers. Reynolds took the podium folder in hand, voice crisp. "These dogs are trained to see threats everywhere. When they fail their assessments, it means they're unstable, dangerous." He pointed toward the back. "Case in point, Mr. Hayes' recent adoption, a failed K9 unit, aggressive, unfit." All eyes turned to Jackson. He stood slowly. Every instinct screamed to sit back down, but the fire inside wouldn't let him. "That dog has a name," he said. "Shadow. In the 4 days I've had him, he's shown me intelligence, discipline, and trauma. Same kind of trauma I've seen in firefighters, in veterans, in myself." Murmurs rippled. Dr. Wilson stepped forward. His scars. "They're surgical, not field wounds. He was handled, experimented on." Reynolds scoffed. "You're a small-town vet. These are military animals." "And I'm a specialized trainer," Marcus said, limping forward. 30 years with K9 units. That dog isn't dangerous. He's recovering. Someone just doesn't want him to." The room erupted into argument. Veterans stood in support. Others remained skeptical. Eventually, the ordinance was tabled, postponed, not defeated. But as Jackson left the meeting, Ray Washington slipped a folded newspaper into his hand. "Check the back page," Ray whispered. "Obits. From last year." Then he was gone, swallowed by the crowd. At home, Jackson spread the newspaper out on the kitchen table, its pages still soft from the humidity. The obituary section was a sea of ordinary tragedy, elderly passings, cancer accidents. Then one name arrested him: James Harlow, 42, former military contractor. Suicide. The accompanying photo showed a man with close-cropped hair and a rigid posture. Jackson squinted, then froze. The same man from the blurry training facility photo. Dr. Wilson had shown him, the one standing beside Shadow. The write-up mentioned Harlow's decorated military service, followed by work with private security firms and training specialized service dogs. A single line at the end, survived by a son, Raymond Washington. Ray, the shelter janitor. The man who'd whispered in Jackson's ear when no one else would. The one who fed Shadow behind Reynolds's back. He wasn't just a bystander. He was Shadow's legacy, carrying the last thread of truth in a system built on silence. Outside, thunder rumbled again. Shadow moved to the window body tense, watching the darkness beyond. His ears twitched at every sound, part soldier, part ghost. Jackson stared at the obituary, the pieces slotting into place. Ray's father had been Shadow's handler, had protected him, had likely died trying to keep him from being erased. "What happened to you both?" Jackson whispered. "What did you see that they needed to bury?" As if summoned, Shadow turned from the window and approached. For the first time since Jackson had brought him home, Shadow made the move. Voluntarily, slowly, with purpose. He pressed his head gently against Jackson's hand. The contact cracked something deep inside Jackson's chest, a wall built of smoke and silence. The fire, the screams, the years of guilt. All of it came rushing back, not as pain, but as shared weight. He sank to his knees and wrapped his arms around the German shepherd's solid, scarred body. "We're going to figure this out," he promised, voice thick. "Whatever they did to you, whoever they are, they'll have to go through me first." Shadow didn't move, didn't make a sound. But a tremor ran through him, a subtle quake beneath the surface. Not fear, relief. He wasn't alone anymore. The rain came hard that night, hammering the tin roof and flooding the dirt road, until Jackson's barn stood like an island. Inside, he worked by flashlight, reinforcing locks, checking windows, tightening the bolts on a world under siege. Shadow never left his side. By dawn, Jackson awoke to a low growl. The German shepherd stood at attention, staring at the front door, muscles taut. Jackson reached for his revolver, but the knock that followed was familiar. "It's Amelia," came Dr. Wilson's muffled voice. He opened the door to find her soaked to the bone, breathless, and clutching a folder thick with paper. "I didn't want to call. I found something." They spread the contents across the kitchen table, emails, reports, training logs, all stamped with the same header, Sentinel program. Shadow moved closer, sniffing the documents. His ears lifted. Recognition sparked somewhere deeper than memory. "Where did this come from?" Jackson asked. "Ray. He's been collecting it since his father died." Dr. Wilson tapped a report. Shadow, or K9435, was part of a unit trained not for explosives or narcotics, but for people-specific individuals. High-value targets. Jackson frowned. "Like military assassins. More like reconnaissance," she said. "They could track targets through airports, deserts, even underwater. But Shadow was different." She flipped to a field report. He developed something they didn't train for. He could detect false identity, knew when someone was lying about who they were. Even when disguises fooled human agents, he wouldn't engage. Jackson stared at the dog curled beneath the table. Why would that make him a threat? Dr. Wilson slid over another document, classified mission logs. 18 months ago, Shadow and his handler were deployed to Afghanistan. Officially, it was routine. Unofficially, they were hunting a traitor inside U.S. intelligence. She hesitated. Shadow identified the target, but when the team moved in, he physically blocked them. Wouldn't let them take the shot. The team went ahead anyway. Jackson didn't need to ask. 3 civilians were killed, she confirmed softly. 1 was a child. The kitchen fell silent, heavy, with the kind of truth that doesn't settle, only lingers. Shadow tried to stop it, she added. He knew. Harlow filed complaints. Then weeks later, Shadow was declared failed equipment. 2 months after that, Harlow was found dead. Carbon monoxide. Jackson's stomach twisted. Ray doesn't think it was suicide. No, Dr. Wilson agreed. He thinks his father was silenced. Jackson sat in stunned silence, the weight of it all pressing down on him like a ceiling ready to collapse. The betrayal, the cover-up, the way they'd stripped Shadow of a name, of rights, of even the decency of memory, he knew Jackson said, and they tried to bury him with the mistake. Dr. Wilson nodded, her voice tight. A dog who can detect lies is an asset, until he exposes the wrong lie. They both turned to Shadow, who now rested near the door, eyes narrowed at something beyond the rain-streaked window. Every line of his body spoke alertness. "Someone's coming," Jackson said, rising to his feet. "No time," Amelia replied. She gathered the Sentinel documents quickly. "We'll hide." "Storm cellar. Trapdoor under the tool chest," Jackson said, moving fast. "Take Shadow. Stay down there until I come for you." Amelia hesitated, but Shadow didn't. He moved beside her without a command, pressing close, protective. Jackson guided them toward the hidden cellar door just as headlights swept across the property. Too fast, too deliberate. A black SUV pulled up. 2 men stepped out, civilian clothes but military movement. Purposeful, efficient. Jackson stayed in the darkened kitchen, revolver in hand, breath slow and silent. "Mr. Hayes," one of them called. "Federal agents, we need to speak with you about a military asset in your possession." He didn't answer. The knock came next, 3 sharp raps. "We are authorized to retrieve government property." Jackson's voice was low but steady. "That property has a name." No reply. The door handle jiggled. Then a sharp crack echoed from the back. Entry forced. Jackson turned the gas burner, letting it flood for a few seconds. Then he struck a match and tossed it in. The explosion was controlled enough to fill the air with smoke and panic. While the agents regrouped, Jackson slipped into the workshop. But the second one was waiting. "Don't move," he barked, weapon raised. Jackson raised his hands, still holding the revolver. "Where's the dog?" the agent demanded. "K-9435 is a government asset, and his retrieval is a matter of national security. If he's so valuable," Jackson asked, voice quiet, "why was he scheduled for destruction?" The man's eyes narrowed. "That's classified." Before he could speak again, a low growl rose from the shadows. Shadow stepped into the light, eyes locked on the intruder. No fear, no hesitation. He was done hiding. The agent turned, weapon swinging toward Shadow, but Jackson was already moving. He lunged, driving his shoulder into the man's chest as Shadow surged forward, a flash of teeth and muscle. They crashed into a workbench, tools clattering to the floor. The agent fought hard, well-trained, fast, but Jackson had something deeper purpose. Shadow circled like a storm, looking for an opening. Then a second figure appeared in the doorway, another man, gun raised. Federal agent freeze, but it was too late. Headlights cut across the workshop windows, casting blinding beams into the chaos. A truck skidded into the yard. Marcus Thompson emerged, shotgun in hand, followed by 2 men Jackson recognized from the council meeting, veterans. "Drop it, son," Marcus said calmly. "You're outnumbered and outgunned." The second agent hesitated, his finger twitching above the trigger. The balance had shifted. The illusion of authority was gone. "We're contractors," the man admitted. "Sentinel recovery team, authorized to retrieve program assets. By who Marcus snapped. Northfield Security Solutions. Private contractor. Jackson's grip tightened on the man beneath him. Shadow isn't an asset. He's a witness, and you were sent to silence him. The agent didn't deny it. Dr. Wilson emerged from the cellar, papers in hand. Ray Washington arrived minutes later, carrying additional files his father had hidden before his death. "This goes high," Ray said quietly. "My father found out Sentinel wasn't just identifying threats, they were creating them, framing civilians, using dogs like Shadow to eliminate liability." Shadow stood beside Jackson now, unwavering, watching, listening. "He refused," Ray continued. "Shadow knew those people were innocent, and he tried to stop it." The two agents were secured in Marcus's truck. It wasn't over, Jackson knew that. Northfield would come again. But now they had evidence, witnesses, a plan. And then crack. The sharp report of a rifle cut the air. A bullet screamed past Jackson's shoulder, splintering the wooden frame of the workshop door. "Sniper," Marcus yelled. "East tree line." Shadow was already moving, a blur of fur and fire charging into the trees. "Shadow, no," Jackson shouted. But the dog was gone. Driven not by command, but by instinct, by purpose. "Cover me," Jackson called, sprinting after him. Rain poured in sheets as Jackson crashed through the underbrush branches, whipping his face. The cypress grove loomed ahead, dense and shadowed. Another shot rang out, closer this time. Then he heard it, a yelp, sharp, pain-filled. "Shadow," he shouted, heart thundering. He found him behind a fallen log, blood streaking through wet fur, but the dog's focus remained locked forward. Beyond the trees, a figure was retreating, rifle slung, moving fast. Jackson moved to chase, but Shadow whimpered and pressed against his leg. "Stay. Safe." "You're hurt," Jackson whispered, checking the wound. A graze, painful but not fatal. Shadow tried to rise, ready to follow, but Jackson held him steady. "Not alone," he said firmly. "We do this together. Or not at all." The German shepherd met his gaze, eyes full of pain and resolve. Then slowly, deliberately, Shadow turned them back toward the barn, toward safety, never once looking away from the threat, until it vanished into the trees. When they reached the workshop, police vehicles were pulling into the drive. Dr. Wilson waved them in. The local sheriff, grim-faced, reviewed the documents, the captured agents, the wreckage. "This is bigger than me," he said. "But I know people, real federal agents. We'll make sure this is heard." As paramedics checked Jackson, Dr. Wilson tended to Shadow's wound. The German shepherd lay quietly, eyes never leaving his human. "He saved your life," she said softly. "That first bullet, it was aimed at you. He shifted your arm just in time." Jackson stared at the dog. "He's been saving lives all along." Later, as the rain softened and cleanup began, Jackson sat beside the fire shadow, resting on a blanket nearby. The warmth of the flames danced in the dog's amber eyes. "You're not a weapon," Jackson murmured. "You're a survivor." Shadow blinked slowly, his body finally easing. The tension that had once gripped him like wire now slackened, if only slightly. Outside, the storm faded. The mud would take time to clear the paperwork even longer, but the war for now was over. In the quiet of the barn, Jackson reached out, and this time, Shadow didn't hesitate. He laid his head in Jackson's lap. Not by command, by trust, by choice.